Who's coping and seething my libtards? Welcome to Beer Thunder, and this video is a little bit late. Like, I was gonna try to get this one done sooner, but then I just didn't have like the motivation to do commentary, and I got distracted. And I was kind of hoping like the new patch would drop. I had a couple different ideas for a video, and I thought about like, okay, I'll cover like maybe do like a final dev server day thing, and I just decided not to do that because there's enough channels that cover every little iteration of the dev server and milk it for views. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna do the right thing, kind of hurt the engagement here, and just wait for the patch to come out and then talk about the patch once it's out, as opposed to just milking everything for views. But speaking of milking, we are milking the F86 F40 Sabre, and we're gonna be going around and milking ye old Toast Man because it's really not anything personal. Like I don't really like hate every content creator. I just hate everyone. That's just the way that it is. It also happens to be this is 9.3 day, 9.3 day with the F86 F40 is the only day that it's kind of sort of viable, and it really isn't. Like this tier is extremely unpopular, extremely unpopulated, and that's kind of why I have to go around and bully Toastman because when there's only 3 lobbies open, 2 of them are nothing but people that are like farming bomb points, just flying back and forth between one point to another, and it's on Sinai or Afghanistan or something like that. That's not fun, and I could join on their team in a different version of a Sabre probably, but also just farming random noobs isn't really fun, and it doesn't really like add anything gameplay wise to like actually commentate about and be like, okay, well this is how you actually play this. But so speaking of the F86s, how do the F86s stack up in Sim? But to make a long story short, is this tier is very compressed. This tier has a lot of boogeymen that you really don't want to be facing all of the time, and that's kind of what you're going to see here. This is a pretty, I would consider this to be a pretty, like, not average game. It's above average because I do get a lot of kills, but it does show kind of like some of the flaws of the play because it's not one of those games where it's like I just go in and frag everyone and never die and never make a mistake. Because in this plane, really just playing it at this tier is kind of like kind of a mistake because your boogeymen include things like the Ariete. The Ariete is just a straight up upgrade to you in every single way possible. I've already done a video about that, so you guys can go watch that. So I'm not going to like belabor that point. But also because of the Ariete bugaboo and the Ariete boogeyman, you also have a bunch of other stuff that's kind of like boogeymen, like the Harrier GR3 is 9.3 in Sim, and it has AIM-9Gs. Now, what are AIM-9Gs? Well, they're just uncaged AIM-9Ds from what I understand, but it's a very, very strong missile at this tier with very good range, and you are in a plane that has no flares, no Riz, which means in order to play this, you always have to be checking your 6, and you really have to make sure to not give people rear aspect for long enough to actually lock one of their good missiles and just slam you out of the sky. The other issue with the Harriers is they're faster than you and they accelerate better, but they turn worse. So if you're trying to run away from one, you can't really do that. You just have to keep turning. And that's kind of the way that I play this plane. This is how I kind of pick people up, is I'm always kind of like pinned into like a left or a right hand turn, looking for things like wingtip vortices and whatnot, and then just kind of like making a decision from there. And speaking of decisions, this is one of those, this is an unforced error on my part. Like this guy here is clearly engaged. I don't need to go for him. I should probably just kind of like fly around, fly away, get speed, and kind of look for a third party. But I kind of go for this guy, and we see if another guy come in just up over our top, and we go for a shot. Now, the F40 has 6 of the Browning M350 cals, and I think at this tier, they're actually not that bad. You have a lot of gun time, which kind of in comparison with like the F86 F2, which is kind of the other Sabre that I predominantly fly. In Sim, having a lot of gun time actually kind of matters quite a bit. Like the F2 Sabre guns, trying to do like the Air RB one tap thing, like just doesn't work nearly as often. So the 50 cals I think are a much better option for probably most players. But we do get that guy, and we get Icarus in here, and the Harrier GR3 comes in and he hits us once, and now we're gonna have to fight him. And this is the problem: Icarus and Toastman, and probably like one other dude that I don't recognize are in a squad. Like I know Icarus and Toastman are in a squad because like I can go through all the games, I can look, and I've fought them before, and they're in the same clan, So they're probably in the same VC, and every time I engage one, usually the other one's like not far behind. Like we're going for one Harrier, or we're going for whatever this plane is because I can't see the preview, but another Harrier just kind of like pops up in front of us, and that's going to be kind of a bad thing. So we shoot a missile, it just goes through the plane. It just goes through the plane, but we have put ourselves, or we're sandwiched between two of them, where one's going to like run away from us, and the other one's going to come up behind us, and we're just going to eat the missile. And that's the problem with the Harriers. That's the problem with kind of like adding the missile boat planes to this BR. Is if they play it correctly and they play their speed, they can kind of like drag you around, and even if one is in front of you, the other one can maneuver behind you and shoot a missile, and then you're dead. So it means that when you're having to fight like 2v1 constantly, it means you really have to figure out ways to end up splitting their attention and getting one and then juggling the other so the other one can't get missile aspect. And it's like, I can do it, but that's, like, it's kind of a pain in the ass, to be honest. Like, it's not something, I don't expect people to load into the game and be like, okay, it's my day one, I plugged in my new VKB Fun Fighter joystick, and I barely mapped the keys, and I'm going to jump in, I want to play Korean War Tier, and you just run into, like, the one or two experienced players that play the BR in something like Ariete or Harrier GR3 and just get your shit rocked. Like, that's going to be a pretty common thing. Like, in order to really play this tier and do it effectively, like, you have to be online, like, all the time, hovering over games for, like, the one time that people are going to play PvP. And then you just got to like, be good out of spite. Like, you just got to be willing to do it out of spite. And really, the only reason I'm playing this plane is I think it looks the best. Like, the paint job, the blue and white is a killer, disgusting, awesome-looking paint job. The flight model on this thing it's good, but it's aged poorly. There's a lot of stuff that got pushed into this tier that didn't need to be here, and you're going to run into that pretty often, I think. But aside from that, when this compared to all of the other Sabres, this one has like a little bit longer wings, and it does have wing slats, but it does have the older F86 F-Series engine. So it's like not the most powerful Sabre engine. Like if you want like a straight upgrade to all of the Sabres and still fly a Sabre, you take the CL-13 Mark 6, which is the same BR, has the same weapons, and also has the two 9Bs. This thing also has two 9Bs, and the 9Bs do add like a pretty decent amount of utility. Like you did see earlier in the video that the Sea Vixen is another issue, but it's less of an issue, and the Sea Vixen should be fighting things like this. Because you have the missiles, even if he tries to run away, you can kind of like use the missile to close the distance. He doesn't have flares, and usually that'll kill him. Now with the 9Bs, what I look for is guys that are like super duper slow, or I try to shoot them from blind spots, or I try to shoot them at guys that are like perfectly vertical, like stalling themselves out. Like the Sea Vixen I shot earlier, I saw him go up. I'm like, okay, cool. He's gonna go for like an energy trap, like kind of like just like straight up and try to do that thing. I was like, nah, I'll shoot the 9B and then go straight back down, because if I'm going up and stalling, like obviously if I'm in a position to be vulnerable for a 9B, you know, it would be even harder to dodge than a 9B, a 9G from a Harrier. But anyways, we get Toastman again with the 9B. He didn't really see it. He probably flared at the last second. And that's the other thing is like the Harrier GR3 also has flares. So you have like a garbage missile that can be basically outpulled very easily unless your target is basically either unaware or just stalled out. But also they could just like hit a button and it usually just goes away. I had two missiles in this game, I think, that were complete duds. Like the one earlier that just traveled through the airframe, like there was no flares, or there was no flares that were rendered, because sometimes what happens is flares just don't render, and then it's unfortunate. And here again with the F-84 here, the F-84 is a pretty hopeless plane, especially at this tier, like in an up tier. The plane is generally just hopeless. But we're going to juggle the F-84. We got the Sabre, whatever it is, the straight wing thing. That's another plane that's like pretty popular for this tier, but mainly for like PvE grinding. That plane, to me, I don't really think it's that big of a threat. It probably has like an okay, it's at good power to weight, I think, but overall, I just kind of like ignore them. Really, the only thing the plane has going for it, as far as I'm concerned, is I think it gets like two 9Bs or something to that effect. So I don't worry about them too much. But as we're doing this, we're kind of having to constantly juggle Harriers all the time. Now, when I keep playing this, when I know that there's guys on the enemy team in Harriers, I'm going to focus them. You have to focus the Harriers. Like, you really don't have an option, because if you end up going straight for any length of time, 9G comes and says, how about you just don't play the game? If you're in a turn fight and you get slow and you give them your aspect, 9G says, don't play the game. Yeah. Everything else, though, is pretty fightable outside of, like, the area. We make a turn, we get slow, and because we're constantly turning, we're going to find ourselves a little bit slower than we want to be most of the time. We do eat shit to the guns from the Harrier. And in all honesty, like, I don't mind the Harrier as far as the fight model. It's really just the 9G. The 9G is the thing that makes the plane kind of oppressive for anything at this BR that does not have flares, unless you're the Ariete, because the Ariete can go fuck itself and kill itself, because that's my thought on that plane. But if you notice, our blue side players, the people on my team, are mainly playing Ariettes, or the guys that are at least getting kills are playing Ariettes. So you end up with a tier at 9.3, 9.0 that if you want to play legacy planes, you're kind of handicapping yourself at this point, which is probably one of the reasons that this tier is not very popular. The other reason it's not very popular is, like, tiers that are not popular can't get popular because, like, you come home from work and you're like, I want to queue up a game, I want to play like the F-86. You see like 3 games and it's like 2v2s on Afghanistan. Like, I'm not going to play this. And then you're like, oh, I'm going to queue up the Sabre, and then, like, you just get your shit wrecked by an Ariete, like, every time. You're like, oh, I don't want to play this. So, like, the tier's unpopular because the players kind of make it unpopular. Anyways, we go up, we go down, we're gaining speed. We're always kind of, like, looking around over, like, our shoulder here, trying to make sure to not give any of these guys a rear aspect for long enough to shoot a missile at us. And we pick up a guy behind us, and we're just going to keep turning for a little bit just to see what he is. If he's not something that's super threatening, we're not going to really commit to it. We're just kind of, like, keeping our tailpipe out of kind of, like, missile aspect until we can, like, decide what he is and then work from there. The other thing that I'm trying to do is trying to get these guys bunched up, or see what both of these guys do in a 2v1, because I'm basically alone right now, so I can't really afford to commit too hard at the wrong time. And I noticed that the F3H2 kind of, like, goes away for a little bit, which means I can commit to the Sabre, and if I can kill him quick enough, I can set up to be ready for the F3H2 and anticipate him coming back. Because the way the F3H2 should play is he should go on full afterburner, basically go in, hit, run, or hit, and then, like, glue himself directly to my 6 if he gets to start on my 6. So I don't want him to start directly on my 6, because getting rid of an F3H2 that's on your 6 within gun range is basically, like, it's not very fun. It means that you lose a lot of energy, and we are pretty much on their side of the map. I don't have, like, a lot of teammates, and I'm always looking out of the corner of my eyes for things like Harriers, and I think that I just saw that right there. So I know that right now I am on the clock, but I looked at his kind of orientation. I know that he's going away, so he has to kind of, like, turn around. So if I can get this guy out of the way, I can start worrying about the Harrier. But when we start straightening out like this, my aim 9G sense starts to tingle. This is where I get a little bit nervous, so I immediately kill this guy. I look over the shoulder and start turning back to the direction I know that at least one of the Harriers should be coming from. Because 9G against a flareless plane, if you show your tailpipe to it for too long, you don't have a good counter to it. The counter is just, like, just shut up and play better, which is that's not really a counter. That's just a thing that you have to do. It's not like, for someone that's trying to learn the game at this tier, would not be super duper motivational and super duper wholesome. And I'm going to skip ahead a little bit here, probably about 2 or 3 minutes. And our Ariette's getting chased by a Harrier, and he's going to eat the AIM-9G up the tailpipe. But I'm basically just going to fully commit to the head-on here. Because, like, in the head-ons, if you're coming in from the bottom and you know that the guy probably doesn't see you if he's distracted, it's a pretty fair bet to do. And when you know that you're fighting people that are in a squad, if you can kind of, like, parse down the squad numbers, or at least, like, grant yourself some separation, where I know right now that if I see a Harrier, I'm expecting to see a second one, and I don't want to spend a lot of time being in a 2v1 and having to deal with that. Now, I see the straight wing plane come in. My brain already tells me that's, like, the de Havilland, the Venom, and it's probably Toastman, and I don't really want to turn fight that thing. That thing turns better than this does at low speed. In order for me to win, I have to do, like, really wide turns and do energy, And the FH2 comes in, doesn't recognize the plane, and just team kills him out of the sky. So I know that I'm kind of chilling right now. But that just kind of goes to show that, like, if you know that you're fighting a squad, usually those guys are not very far apart from each other. I skip ahead again, and I have committed to fighting the Sabre and trying to secure some kills, because even though I know the Icarus and Toastman are on the enemy team, and I am looking for them out of the corner of my eye, I'm not like going out of my way to exclusively focus on them. Like, I still want to kill other people on the enemy team. It's just the 9G is a big enough threat, and the squad is a big enough threat that when they do engage me, they become the priority target. And we get one guy in a Harrier. He comes in, he goes head on, he goes straight up, and that to me looks like bait. And sure enough, I kind of like swing my head around, start looking over my shoulder, maneuvering the plane, and I pick up a second Harrier. Now, the way that I'm going to approach this is I'm basically going to juggle both of these guys. And I know that if I follow one straight, the second one is trying to maneuver around behind me to shoot an AIM-9G. Basically the same way that they approached it in kind of like the very first clip, fight, whatever you want to call it, that I showed. So as I push one away, I get behind one, and he can't turn around very quick. So I start going for the second one, the guy that is definitely going to be trying to come up behind me. And if he reverses his turn and he puts himself like nice and slow in front of me, I will commit to that. But I know they're doing this like little dragon bag thing, so I'm always looking over my shoulder. I'm going to look at the map and see like where we're going. And this guy is like, oh, the F-86 is behind me. Got to run straight to the airfield. Like, I'm not going to catch him. So there's no point in me committing to this part. And I know for a fact that both of them know where I'm at. Both of them are a threat to me, and I need to anticipate that. So that guy's going towards the airfield. This other guy is trying to maneuver behind me. He doesn't pick me up, so we kind of get to reset the whole entire engagement from kind of the get-go here. Because now that we know that in front of us are two Harriers, so we're no longer sandwiched between them, and we're trying to not be sandwiched. But it's hard. It's hard because you can't really make a decision to kill one of these guys without worrying about the other. Like, the first guy comes in, he turns around, he went head on. This other guy ran further away, and I know that the first guy that went head on, he's turning around right now to try to go for me. And that means I'm working on the clock. And I get this guy, I get him in front of me, and there's the second guy. Second guy comes back, and the third guy is the Ariete. And this is the point where I make a decision like, okay, I can commit to whatever one that I assume that the Ariete is not on. So what I'm looking for is a Harrier that doesn't have someone directly behind him, because now instead of being a 1v2, it's a 2v2, and our planes have like a pretty like nice advantage in kind of like this from this point forward. So I'm gonna just kind of like sit behind Toastman and assume that the guy that he's fighting with doesn't have the coordination, doesn't have like the position to like really have the ability to kind of like outturn, risk turning in front of the Ariete that just like looked like it came in and glued himself like directly to his tail. That I can probably get Toastman here. And even though I get him though, I'm still going to look over the shoulder because I'm looking for that Harrier. Because if you look at the kill feed, Harrier didn't pop up. Harrier hasn't like officially died yet, so I'm still worried about that. I think eventually the Ariete gets him. I don't really know. I kind of cut part of the video out because like this is an hour-long game. I have to pick and choose like what we see. Like it is what it is. So a little bit later in the game, a guy is running yellow smoke, and I think I've picked up both of the Harriers again, and they're both chasing what looks like probably the Ariete. So I'm going to come in, I'm going to try to help, I'm going to try to basically figure out which one I want to commit to first. The guy that is going up is looking like an easy target for a 9B. He doesn't see it, the 9B connects, and I'm not going to chase this guy to confirm the kill because I don't really care that he has damage. He has critical damage, and if he goes RTB, that means I have like 2 to 3 minutes of like uninterrupted time to worry about the rest of his teammates, so I don't have to worry about getting 2v1. So in some ways, just letting him like fly around and like peter himself out is better for me. Anyways, the Ariete is involved with Toastman. I find Toastman again, and it looks like he's going super duper slow. So I just come in and I shoot him out of the sky. Icarus is gonna probably crash land before he gets to base. I can't really. This game was a few days ago, but so I'll just let him fly around. I know Toastman's not involved right now because he just went down. So I can kind of like I can choose to commit to the sub and it starts to go well for me, but because I drop my guard and because I make a mistake here, because the Sob's going to spin himself out, I'm going to overshoot, basically fly through his guns, and then an F3H2 Boogeyman is going to like basically pop up and kill me. And the F3H2 is it's a really solid 9.3. I haven't played it a lot. I don't even think I've actually played it at all. But at 9.3, it's very solid. It's one of those Boogeyman planes that it can do things like that. It has good guns with lots of ammo, and it's fat, but it turns well for one turn. And it's really good at just kind of gluing itself directly behind you and going, "Surprise, motherfucker!" and you die. The other plane to kind of look out for at this BR, by the way, is the F4D. It's an event plane. I think Enigma has a video on it, and that thing is it's just as absolutely obnoxious as the Ariat. And there's a couple of guys that have the F4D that fly it at this tier that kind of end up fun policing you. So just look forward to that. Anyways, we get a revenge on the F3H, or do we? Nope, we get the dud missile. The missile just it just flew through his cockpit. Like, even in chat, the guy was like, "I don't understand what happened. I think that just flew through my cockpit." I'm like, "Yep, that definitely happened." So AIM-9B's the B stands for barely works some of the time. So overall, what do I think of the plane? Overall, I think the plane is fun to play when you do okay in it, when you're not going up against matchups that seem very unfair and extremely one-sided. Unfortunately, at 9.3, you're going to find that oftentimes your matchups are not very good. Your matchups against some of the most meta planes in the game are especially bad. Your matchup against the Ariat is just a losing matchup. Your matchup against the F4D is just a straight losing matchup. Fighting things like Harriers with AIM-9Gs, while it is possible, while demonstrated that it is possible, for a lot of people, it's not going to be the most fun and enjoyable thing in the world. And that's okay, but it means that this tier is kind of plagued by kind of like an unfortunate reality that is unfortunate for kind of all of Sim, where you have something that has the potential to be very fun, which ends up being not so much that. You end up with a lot of planes that are just outclassed, where there's kind of like it's like kind of like a meta-induced suicide pact, where if you play 9.0, 9.3 days, if you want to be competitive, you take the most meta thing in the game, which forces other people to counter with the most meta thing in the game, and it means that even though you have 1,000 planes to choose from, really your viable choices are kind of limited to like 5 or 6 on any given day of the week. Like, Toastman here was really based in the fact that he did switch to the Venom FB4 a couple of times, but every time he switched, he kind of like ate a missile or died right away. Like, I didn't even kill him in the Venom, like somebody else did, and I don't even think I dogfought him in the Venom. I think the clip that you saw earlier, and in addition to like the first time they switched to it, like I ended up getting killed by like Roland's because I got too close to the airfield. That got edited out because, I mean, it's an hour of footage, like you're not going to see everything. But every time he played the Venom, it didn't go well for him, and then he immediately switches back to the Harrier GR3, which, at least with the 9Gs, with the flight model, with like just the fact that it's fast, means that you can pretty consistently get kills. And that's what I see oftentimes is people will play like Ariat at this tier, but they won't play anything else. And when they do play something else, they play for like 20 to 30 minutes, immediately don't realize they're in the fragmobile, and they leave the game. And that's kind of what happened to this one, is as I'm kind of like flying around, I'm only going like 18-7 or 20-7 or something like that by the very end of it. And the enemy team has quit. The enemy team has capitulated, and that's the other issue, is spawn costs this tier are just as expensive as top tier. It's harder to get your kills. It's harder to meet your useful action threshold. And that just kind of exacerbates the issue, where you play this game for 2 hours, you die like 5 or 6 times, and you just lost 100,000 SL, and you're just like, why bother? Why play this? The other issue is, like, if you play the lobbies that aren't infested with people like tryharding and PvP, you're facing people that are basically bots and bombers, where you die to tail gunner, or you're just like flying around aimlessly bored for what feels like for frickin' ever. And that in itself is also just not fun. So you're sitting in the hangar, you're camping the loading game screen, waiting for someone to pop in that you're like, okay, finally a 64-kilometer map with a reasonable player count that is not like horribly unbalanced, is not going to be like a horrible time. And when you get those games, it's really good. Like, it has a lot of potential. Your chances of just like loading up the game and finding those is few, far between, none, zip, nada, zilch. Not gonna happen. Like, I love this plane because like the paint job is just cool. It just looks cool as hell. It's the best looking paint job in the game. It's probably like the most mediocre Sabre that's at 9.3, because like the CL13 Mark 6 is just like a straight up better plane, and the other Sabres are also performance wise about the same, a little bit worse in turning capability because no wing slats and no big wing, but at least at 9.0 you get a Dodge AIM 9G, and the F86s that are 8.7, the machine gun ones on 8.7 days are actually like pretty fun, pretty good. And that's probably the BR that I would recommend for people to play in Sabre tier, because going above that, getting into 9.0 just becomes very oppressive. Not most of the time, like you can still find good games, but when you do get your shit kicked in by some noob in an area who has no clue how to play the game and just wins by turning in the same direction, it can be pretty damn discouraging. But that's just the reality of the game. It's not going to change anytime soon. I'm not the community director. There is no sim community director. There is no sim game developer, I don't think. So it is what it is. Enjoy it when you can, but don't expect the world out of this plane, because it's really just a F86 with some AIM 9Bs competing against some things that it hasn't aged very well against. Anyways, that's going to be the video. We're going to just kind of fast forward to the end screen. We do win the game. We did convince a lot of people to quit, but overall, fun plane. 9.3 though, some very challenging matchups, some very kind of not so fun aspects of the game. But if you could get beyond like the horribleness, you can find a way. Life finds a way. Fragging people finds a way. Anyways, that's the video. That's Beer Thunder. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to try to put this out on either Sunday or Monday. I'm a little bit behind, like what I've set is kind of like my little schedule. But hopefully this week we'll get patches and I can talk about new stuff and we'll get more players in the game. Anyways, bye.